Good evening, one and all, and welcome to Trinity House, Newcastle upon Tyne. You heard the remit there. Was also asked a little bit earlier on to explain why you're here tonight. And of course, Trinity House, Newcastle has been very heavily involved in surfboard design since 1500. Not quite the truth, but I've already picked up on a few things. You had an illustration of James Cook, his expeditions earlier on. James Cook was one of the honorary brethren of Trinity House, and we have in fact got a complete set of the illustrations, the sketches that were done on his 3 voyages to the Southern Oceans. There are a few other connections with the house. In the cabinet in the entrance hall there when you came in, you may have noticed the big sailing ship, the Ville de Paris, which was Admiral Lord Collingwood's last flagship. And down by the side of it, there are models of 2 Polynesian surf boats, one of them with an outrigger there. So that's getting reasonably close to it. If you want to come closer to home, if you get the chance to come back in the house and have a look around at some stage, you'll find quite a few models of Northeast cobles and fishing boats. Trinity House Newcastle sponsored the first competition for a lifeboat design. That's the Great Head and Woodhaven controversy. But those boats, of course, had a very high prow on them because they were designed to be launched through the surf. So there are indeed legitimate connections, and I'll tell you one more there as we go through. But Trinity House Newcastle has been here since the 4th of January 1505, and we got this plot of land here from a family called the Heavens. It's not the place downriver, but a family called the Heavens, and they gave us the land here in exchange for a red rose to be paid yearly on demand on Midsummer's Day, a peppercorn rent. Yeah. They haven't come collecting that for several hundred years, so I think they're going to bankrupt every florist in the town if they decide to call in the debts. A few years later, we got some more land from the descendant of the original benefactor, and that was in exchange for a pottle of wine to be paid on the feast of John the Baptist. And a pottle is not a 75 centilitre bottle, but half a gallon. And they haven't come claiming that either, so it's going to be one hell of a party if they do. We started out as a charitable guild, the Guild of the Blessed Trinity of the town of Newcastle upon Tyne, aimed at seafarers and the seafaring community and looking after them. And right in the beginning, we had church protection, which is where it got the name from, Trinity House. And the day we came into being, the 4th of January 1505, we built the chapel and the first of the almshouses that looked after the seafarers. Very soon after that, we got the first of 6 royal charters, one from Henry VIII, that enabled us to levy dues on the ships and told us what we had to do with the money. The dues that we used to levy, foreign ships were charged 4pence and English ships were charged 2pence, old money. Right? But one of the things, most noticeable things we had to do was to build 2 embattled towers at the entrance to the River Tyne, in which would be maintained lights. And they were the original high and low lights. We're on the 3rd generation now, but they were the original ones. And the original low light was on wheels. They used to move it backwards and forwards. And that's because before they built the piers, every time there was a storm, the sands used to shift in the river entrance. So the safe channel used to move. And the idea of having 2 lights is that it gives you a line to come in on. You get the 2 lights in line and that tells you how to get into the river. Well, with the shifting sands, they used to have a way of accounting for that. So they used to move the low light backwards and forwards. Trinity House you may associate with pilots, you may associate with lighthouses. We are today still a maritime authority. We still examine and license North Sea deep sea pilots, and we're involved in the River Tyne, safety of navigation there, and also Blythe. Lighthouses and marks. Our patch was originally from Berwick down to Scarborough. So we looked after all of the inshore lights and marks on that particular patch for several centuries. That has now all been consolidated on the General Lighthouse Authority, Trinity House, London. But we are still a working maritime authority. The other side of our business, of course, is looking after these wonderful buildings. You're just seeing a bit of it here tonight, but we own quite a lot of property all the way around here. And indeed, the house is full of quite a collection of artefacts. And I do urge you at some stage, if you get the opportunity, come back and have a look. But just by way of contrast, I'll tell you about a few things in here. Just look up for a start. Now, what is it that's on the blue section there? The dark blue section. What are you looking at? It's a compass. Compass, yeah? And where the fleur-de-lis is, you can see the North Point there. The ship in the middle is rather good. And in fact, you're all seated, so it rather destroys the fun that we have with it. But that's actually an optical illusion. And wherever you are in the room, the wind follows you, and the sails appear to fill from where you're stood. These two pictures over the fireplace, would anybody, unless you've already read the little story by the side of it, what do you think those are made out of?
Ship sails?
No, you're close though. It's another of the lost arts, yeah? You've seen sailors doing scrimshaw and ships in bottles and carvings and all that sort of thing. This is another one that sailors used to do. That's wool on canvas. And each strand there is individual. There's nothing painted on, there's nothing coloured. Every one of those is stitched on. It's the Ardmillan and the Otterspool. They're about 130 years old, done by a ship's carpenter. By contrast, the two bigger pictures, this one, the bombardment of Algiers, and that one down there, that's colloquially known as St. Vincent, but it's actually the heroic exploits of Admiral Lord Collingwood in HMS Excellent at the Battle of Cape St. Vincent, to give it its full title. Both done by a very famous local artist, John Wilson Carmichael. And I must admit, I was getting mildly concerned when your colleague here was wafting this big board around, because it was getting awfully close to that thing. The artists in those days, there were no photographs, and they would do an awful lot of research to make sure they got the line of battle right, and the ships looked right, and all that sort of thing. Carmichael's as well. There's always a fellow with a little red hat. Whenever you go and have a look, I mean, there's plenty of Carmichaels around there in the Lane Art Gallery and whatever. There's always a guy with a little red hat. The one thing that would influence it is if the naval officer came along and he said, "You've got to make my ship look good," and pass a little brown envelope, and then the artist would make sure that it looked good. But they're lovely, lovely paintings. That was the Black Middens, the picture up here, yeah? One of the things we've got out in the entrance hall there is a knight's head from a ship called the Betsy Cains that was also wrecked on the Black Middens, but in the 19th century. The Betsy Cains was, at the time she was wrecked, the oldest sailing ship afloat. She was about 130 years old when she went up on the rocks. She started life as a royal yacht, Danish royal yacht, and she ended her life as a collier. And she was outbound from the Tyne with coal for Hamburg. She went out once and turned back, tried to go out a second time, got hit by the weather and ended up on the Black Middens. And she was then subsequently destroyed by a combination of souvenir hunters and more gales. But there were things salved off it. One of them was the knight's head. Knight's heads were put at either side of the bowsprit on a sailing ship. Tucked in there, little decorative features. And some of her timbers were salved, and the Brethren of Trinity House at the time were all presented with wooden snuff boxes from the timbers. But it's quite a place, the Black Middens. The reason ships go up on it is actually due to the piers. The piers protect quiet water, and the tide rips across the mouth of the Tyne north-south and can get quite strong. So if a ship comes in slowly, what happens is it gets its nose into the quiet water while the back of it, the stern of it, is still under the influence of the tide. So it will get pushed one way or the other. And if it doesn't correct that, it either ends up on the Black Middens on the north side or the Herd Sands on the south side. And there are many, many ships that have ended up both sides throughout history. Don't think you have quite that problem with the surfboard. Okay, thank you very much.